Morning, Mr Mayor. Councillors, there's several start items. I'd like to unstar 6.4, 6.5, which leaves us with the Governance, Finance and Administration Committee minutes, the forward planning schedule and the city operational plan still starred. Everybody happy with those? No. So move Councillor Patterson, seconded Councillor Young. All in favour? Thank you. I don't have any conflicts of interest declarations, so we'll go to 6.1, which is the Audit and Risk Committee Chair Annual Report. And the good news is we have the Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee here today to give a presentation. Hello, Ian.
There you go, that's probably better. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about the Audit and Risk Committee. I've provided a fairly comprehensive paper, which I don't intend to go through in any detail, but I thought I'd just talk for a few minutes with some observations about the role of the committee, some of the changes that we're making to the way the committee operates, and maybe just talk about some of the highlights of the last year from the committee's point of view and some of the challenges that we're facing. I'd anticipate only speaking for 5 or 6 minutes, and then I'm very happy to take any questions you might have about the functioning of the committee. So firstly, the Audit and Risk Committee provides independent advice to Council and the CEO on the governance, accountability, risk management and any audit-related matters. The committee comprises 6 members, including 2 councillors, Councillors Hamill and Young, and 4 external members. Collectively, we bring a broad range of experience in internal audit, external audit, risk management and financial accounting. I became chair of the committee in January of this year, having been an independent member of the committee for 2 years before that. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my predecessor, Jeff King, for the strong contribution he made to the Audit Committee and to Council in his role as chair for several years. I'd also like to recognise the contribution made by Councillor Owen Jones whilst he was a member of the committee and for his continued support to me and to the committee since he resigned as a member of the committee earlier this year. The work of this committee isn't glamorous. The meetings are long, perhaps too long. Yesterday's meeting was 6.5 hours. The papers are also long. Yesterday we had 520 pages and they're often complex. But the conversations are robust, and I do believe that the committee is providing a strong and consistent voice and has played an important role in improving Council's governance and accountability. It was particularly pleasing yesterday to hear from the Queensland Audit Office and the director from the Queensland Audit Office who attends all the Audit Committee meetings, who described our Audit and Risk Committee as the most effective of any of the committees he attends in the local government sector. So it's very pleasing. Before I talk further about the operations of the committee and our achievements in the last 12 months, I'd like to make some observations about the risk and governance environment in which the Council is operating. This is a large and complex organisation. I'm sure that's no surprise to anybody around the table today. Over 4,500 staff, annual operating budget of over $1.8 billion, an asset base of over $20 billion. The substantial risk structure and reform process being led by the Council CEO is timely and necessary, and it should lead to a Council which is a safer place to work for both staff and contractors, delivering better services to ratepayers more effectively and efficiently. It should also improve accountability and transparency in meeting your obligations to the community. The Audit and Risk Committee is strongly supportive of this programme and is committed to working alongside the CEO and his executive team to ensure the success of this programme. I'd now just like to talk briefly about the operations of the committee. So the committee met 6 times in the last 12 months. That's up to 30th September. Each member of the committee has made a strong contribution to the committee, and I'd like to thank each of them for their openness and the constructive challenge that they have brought. I'm pleased to report that, in my view, the committee was very effective during the year and has covered each and all of the areas of responsibility in our charter quite comprehensively. Having said that, as incoming chair, I've initiated a number of important changes to help enhance the committee's work. Some of these are quite simple, but I think quite important. So firstly, we're now carrying out site visits. So rather than sitting here in Bundall in the council chambers, we're now having at least 50% of our meetings every year out in council sites. In the last 12 months, we've held meetings at the Pimpana Community Centre, the Aquatic Centre, and at the Nerang Administration Centre. So as well as improving our understanding of the operations, this gives the committee the opportunity to speak directly to council staff on the ground, and it also improves the visibility of the work the committee does. Secondly, we've moved to a predominantly boardroom-style format for our meetings. This is intended to make our meetings a safer and more collaborative space for council staff to participate in the conversations that we have. And as I said, those conversations are frequently quite robust. And so we're finding that boardroom setting is a more conducive environment for everybody to do that. Finally, and this is very much still a work in progress, I'm trying to reduce the length of the meetings and also reducing the size of the papers. As I said, yesterday's meeting was 6.5 hours. That's simply too long to expect council staff and executives to sit through regularly. And so we're working very hard to get the papers shorter, more concise and more focused on the important issues so we can all address the key concerns and then move on. So there's more work to be done on that in the coming year. So just to talk briefly about some of the key achievements for both council and for the committee in the year to 30 September past. So firstly, we should record that the financial statements for the council were again unqualified by the auditors, and for the first time the council prepared consolidated financial statements incorporating the results of all of its controlled entities other than the insurance company. This is quite important because it's providing a catalyst for getting a consistent level of accounting and process for each of the controlled entities, which has not been there in the past. And I think we're already starting to see some significant improvements in the work being done by some of those smaller entities, which are really important to the success of council. I'm also very pleased to say that we've seen significant improvements in the council's approach to risk management and its risk management systems. This has been a focus of the committee for several years, and it's really pleasing to see the progress that's being made there. There's still a long way to go. It's a complex exercise in a big organisation like this, but what I'm most pleased about is that there's a clear plan, there's a roadmap for implementing the improvements, and really importantly, we're seeing really strong support from the CEO and a commitment to make this work. So the committee will continue to monitor the success in implementing that, but the reports we're getting are certainly significantly improved. The fourth area I'm very pleased about is again, something that my predecessors have talked to this committee about in the past, and that's resolving old audit recommendations. At the start of the year, I think there were over 130 audit recommendations from both internal audit and external audit that were yet to be resolved. Many of them were overdue. Council have made some really strong progress in reducing the number of recommendations that are outstanding at the end of the year. And there's still more work to be done, but it's certainly looking much better. So now on to some of the challenges, and I just want to focus on one area in particular. So one of the areas that the committee has had concerns about the past 2 years in particular relates to internal audit and its positioning in the organisation. In an ideal world, the head of internal audit would be a direct report to the chief executive. In reality, this is often not practical. What's happened at council in the last 2 years is that we've had significant turnover in the leadership of the internal audit functions, and this has exposed, I guess, some structural weaknesses in the reporting lines for internal audit. This has led to some concerns about internal audit and whether it has a strong voice within council, and particularly in planning the internal audit programme. As a result, the committee was unable to support and endorse the internal audit plan for 2023-24. We did, however, agree a list of worthwhile projects, but we were unable to conclude whether this provided adequate coverage across council's operations. We've had some very robust conversations with this, with the the executives in particular, and I'm very pleased to say it's being addressed through the restructure, and Council's now in the process of recruiting for the new position of Chief Risk and Audit Officer. And I'm pleased to have been consulted in setting the role description for that role, and I will also be involved in the selection process as well. I would like to emphasise that Council has a very strong and effective team in its internal audit unit, and the reports they're preparing have generally been of a very high standard. So our concern is about the structure and reporting lines for internal audit as opposed to the individuals and the effectiveness of the work they're doing per se. So that's all I was preparing to say. The committee will continue its work in the current year, and we're extremely appreciative of the strong support we received from Council, from the CEO and the management team, and from this committee as well. So I'm now very happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ian. Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chairman. Through you, I just wondered if you could enlighten those of us who haven't been at Audit Committee what the key risk areas were considered as part of the restructure.
Well, the restructure, as I'm sure you know, has been supported by a significant team within Council and a significant governance process that was put around that. At our committee meeting in September, we had a presentation from the Council team that have been managing that, and there's a separate risk register that sets out all of the key risks around the 1CP process. So it's a pretty comprehensive register, and we're certainly satisfied that the governance process around that has been quite adequate. I don't know that I can tell you about the specific risks on that register, but there was a strong view that it was quite comprehensive.
Thank you. I guess I'll look at the register.
Councillors, are there any other questions for Anne? No, I think you've done well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, are there any other questions in regards to item 6.1? Councillor Patterson.
I just have a comment to make through you, Chair. First of all, as having observed, been an observer, I do want to thank Ian for the way he chairs those meetings. It's very open and accessible. But I do also want to make an acknowledgement to you, Councillor Owen-Jones. It isn't any mean feat to do that work and to be on that committee day in, year in, year out. I believe you have represented Council on that committee for 11 years straight. So I just thought it was, this is the time just to say thank you for that particular work that you've done. So thank you. I know that this Council is in a far better position because you've been there and representing us. So thank you.
Cheers. Councillor Hamill.
Mr Chair, I thought Ian touched on this comment briefly, but I thought there was some comments from David Adams from the QAO yesterday that I'd share with all members here today, and that was the comments that were, as Ian said, around the effectiveness of our Audit and Risk Committee, that he rated it as one of the best, if not the best, in local government in Queensland. I think the other comment that he made yesterday that should be repeated was his extremely high praise for the shift he has seen in this organisation's focus on getting its financials ready earlier and with more detail in solving out problems. He made the point of calling out our CFO, Jackie Frost, for taking on challenges that he felt hadn't been dealt with for some time, and that she'd come in with an attitude to resolve those things and to do better, and that her and her team had absolutely smashed it out of the park, and that was extremely high praise to hear from Queensland Audit Office there yesterday. And finally, I'd just share Councillor Patterson's comments about Ian as chair of that committee. Is an excellent chair, but the quality of the 4 independent members we have in general, the quality of the debate and conversation that goes on and the level of experience those independent members bring, it's very obvious, especially for a younger group of officers taking on roles inside the organisation, that they really enjoy the chance to come to Audit and Risk Committee and be part of those conversations. I know outside of committees that a lot of those officers are regularly having catch-ups or talking with those independent members further and seeking that extra advice and assistance. So that's really good to see. And just to say that it's been an eye-opening experience for me since taking over from you, and one I've really enjoyed. And again, would encourage all councillors that you don't need to be a member to come to Audit and Risk, and you definitely don't need to be a member to get something from it. The conversation and the insight into our organisation and what's happening, and especially the future focus of things, that any councillor should come along as often as they can, and you will get something from it. I promise you that.
Yeah. Councillor Pauline, we'd like to move it.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. And just to reiterate what the other two councillors have said, but also yesterday there was a gentleman in the meeting from the Audit Office who's actually doing an audit on all of the audit and risk committees within Queensland, and I think there's 61 of them. There's a few councils that don't have it, and he's doing an audit on all of those, and the Queensland Audit Committee recommended that he came to our meeting because it was one to benchmark back to in the future, and the fact of the good work that we're doing, the incredible calibre of the officers that are presenting at the meeting, and for an organisation as big and as complex we are, that they're very pleased with the progress that we're making, and very, I think, supportive of the fact that we're not just looking at the here and now, we're looking at the future of the city and where it's going. So, yeah, it was, and they take councillors' comments on board, which is fantastic, and it gives them the scope to decide what they're actually going to look at for the following year. So it's I think I've been about 4 or 5, maybe 5 years now, and I've got a lot out of it every meeting I've gone to. So thank you.
Well, I reckon I'll second it, and then we'll vote on it. And Darren, thanks for attending yesterday afternoon, a late starter. Rightio, all in favour? Carried. Councillors, 6.3, the consolidation of investment policies. Did you miss Darren?
No, Councillor Pauline Young, I acknowledged you in your 11 years as councillor and being your partner. How many of them?
Rightio, 6.3.
Good morning, councillors. Presented before you today is the next round of policy reviews that have come through from the broader project that's happening with the Transformation Delivery Group. We did a workshop in the last couple of months to review 5 policies together. When we reviewed those 5 policies together, what we identified is that there were 3 policies that spoke about like topics, and the like topics was in relation to investments, and it was the investment, credit risk and financial instrument policies. And when we looked at those 3 policies, what we identified is that they all spoke to investments in some way, shape or form. The investment policy is a legislative policy under the Local Government Act, and we're required in terms of complying with the Local Government Act to ensure that that investment policy allows for investments in a way that complies with the statutory body's Financial Arrangements Act, and under that Act there are 3 types of categories of investments. We did some benchmarking with other councils across Queensland to see how they actually constructed their policies for investments, and what we identified is that there were 4 key principles in addressing investments for councils, and they centred around managing liquidity, preserving capital, maximising return on investments, balancing investment growth with credit risk. We've reviewed the 3 policies in light of those principles, and presented before you is a revised policy for consideration.
Councillors, are there any questions? So I have a question in regards to page 91, which was table 3 in the investment products, and at the bottom it talks about managed funds, and limiting managed funds to 50% of the investment portfolio, and I'd be interested to know what the officers thought by managed funds.
I might direct to Jackie in terms of clarifying the financial term.
Managed funds would be primarily term deposits with major financial institutions. Term deposits from 3 months up to a maximum of 2 years.
And does it exclude anything other than term? I don't have a problem with term deposits, but managed funds can be a bit exotic at times.
Yep, it's primarily managing cash funds.
Yeah. So do you think there might be a merit in inserting the word cash between managed and funds?
I've no concerns with that.
Mr. CEO?
Yeah, I don't think it seeks to limit the management of cash to term deposits, does it, manager? But I think I don't have any issue with that. It's just a more generic term for the management of cash.
Correct.
So, I mean, I have been in this space before, Chair, where, you know, cash can be managed in lots of ways. You have what they call active cash sometimes, which gives the perception that it's actually cash in the bank, but it's in highly liquid assets. So it's really up to council. But I mean, for clarity, we could add it. It's really, but that section is about the management of cash and how we manage our cash.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So I think we'd be better off having the word cash in there because, like, I mean, in my mind, a managed fund that invests in emus or things that grow, you know, satisfy the policy in terms of the words, but not the intent, whereas cash makes it very clear. And I know that we talk about risk and minimising risk and all of those things, but given the fact that we're talking about maybe putting up to 50% off the funds at any point in time with a funds manager, I think it should predominantly be about improving the yield from a cash basis as opposed to anything more exotic.
So through you, Chair, where this becomes an issue, particularly in the financial sector, is where it starts to go backwards.
Yep.
And there's the perception, but it's in cash. So the investment could go backwards. And so usually in an investment sense, if you're saying managed fund or you mean cash, you mean you're putting it in term deposits with a interest return. In cycles where you can have very low interest, where admin costs are more, or where even in some cases cash can go backwards. And I know from my time in superannuation, we had a lot of members who put their money in cash and then were in a state of shock that their investment had gone backwards because they thought, hang on, haven't I just put this in cash at bank? So we're not talking about cash at bank. We're talking about putting it in some kind of active investment. But I take your point, Chair, that at the end of the day, we're talking about cash in its raw sense, so it's probably better to include it.
Yes.
And we're saying that at least 50% of the fund should be in a liquid cash investment.
That's correct. And in our financial statements, it is disclosed under the heading of cash and investment, so it is part of that line item in our financial statements.
Councillor Patterson, did you have a question?
No, I agree.
Any other questions, councillors? Would anybody like to move it? Move Councillor Tate, seconded Councillor Hamill. Mr Mayor, would you like to speak to it?
It's an excellent report. I had a private presentation on that, and as I look at it, legislation-wise, we have to get going on it, and so retiring these two to make it more clarity for the future. You know, congratulations to the team for putting this together and headed by the CEO.
Right.
Now I have a question.
Okay.
Do we need to note that change in point 3 of the recommendation?
I'll make
No.
it.
What we can do, sorry, through you, Chair, is the version that goes to council will have the change in it, full council.
Anybody like to speak against investments? Rightio. Mr Mayor, you happy with the close? All in favour? Carried. Uh, 6.4 was the animal control register. So I'm happy to move it. I do have a question on behalf of Councillor Petty Young, who is not here yet. Seconded by Councillor Pauline Young. You done? Rightio. So Councillor Petty Young phoned me because he had a question which was just in regards, and it may not necessarily be able to be dealt with today, but he has a dog park in Pacific Pines where there is a very short distance from the designated dog off-leash area to the car park. And some of his residents have received an infringement notice for not having their dog on a leash as it's exited the car to go to immediately to the dog off-leash area. And he was wondering whether or not we could give some consideration to making minor changes. Councillor.
Through you, Chair, I'll take that one, if that's all right. I mean, I'm happy to have a discussion about minor changes. I would say that there's a degree of discretion required there more with the compliance officers, and we've got the new EGM sitting next to me who now has responsibility for that. I think a level of practicality is probably should be applied to all of our enforcement, and I would suggest that that's probably a more practical way to handle that. However, I'm obviously happy to have a discussion about how we might amend to make that work.
And I have no knowledge of the breed of dog, or if there were other circumstances, or if there was a complaints or anything along those lines. He just flagged it as being something that he felt was a bit onerous for the resident.
Yeah, so I think that the most sensible approach, Chair, would be for us to have a look at the specifics, and if there are anything that we think requires change or is necessary, we could make sure that's included at full council. But it's a bit hard if we don't. I don't know the specific area, but I would say, given the way it's been described, a degree of practicality and discretion is probably the best way to handle that, which is what I would expect from all of our compliance officers in the city.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. So when is the next scheduled review of these off-leash areas?
It will commence in early January.
Right, thank you. So I'm happy to move it. I'll speak briefly to it to say that there are several new proposed off-leash dog areas in Division 2 that has taken, because of the process that we have to do, has gone through a long time. And I thank the officers, because I think it was originally scheduled to go to the Lifestyle Committee that got cancelled, and so we rescheduled it onto today so that we could get it done before the caretaker period commenced. So thank you for that. So is everybody happy with that? All in favour? Carried. Thank you. Uh, 6.5, I unstarted because I had, this was the supplementary agenda divisional allocation report, program additions. I had put in a request for a new piece of footpath in Riverlinks, and it didn't make it onto the report, so I'd like to add it. And so that was so it would amend page 5. So all of the existing attachment would be there, and it would amend page 5 to add a new footpath for $122,800. Councillor Hamill, as you appreciate, fixing pieces of footpath that are missing are important for the community, so I just thought that I'd actually get this one done rather than just send out the letters. So seconded, Councillor Hamill. Councillors, all in favour? Carried. Thank you. So now we have some closed items, councillors. We have the proposed acquisition of land at Goldmine Road, Ormo, which is closed for budgetary reasons. So if I could have somebody move us to closed. Move Councillor Daphne McDonald, seconded Councillor Pauline Young. All in favour? Carried.
come out.
The contracting plan for the design and refurbishment of Bundle Precinct. Does anybody have any questions in regard? Rightio, we're going to deal with 7.1 first. Sorry? Okay, so let's deal with 7.3 first, and then we'll have Councillor Young after we've done that. So, Councillor Young, we're going to vote on 7.3, and then we're going to invite you back in. How does that sound? Right, so Councillor Taylor, you're going to move that. You got words? It's a good idea.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Look, over the years, we've got some great community organisations that do a lot of great work for our city, and as a council, we need to support them. What we've got here is a review of all the funding for our funded identities and also our community grants, and it gives us the ability to hopefully continue to support all the groups that's in our community from all divisions moving forward.
Does anybody want to speak against? Does anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Pauline Young.
And thank you through the chair. Also, like hearing what Councillor Taylor's got to say as well, but I think the most important thing to realise with this report is that all those community groups will be on the same milestones, the same benchmarks, the same ability to apply for the funding and the same ability to be able to quit the funding. I think it's giving us a fairer playing field so that there's those that don't feel potentially that they are not being given the same consideration for bigger events as to smaller events. So I think it'll make it a fairer playing field, and I congratulate Matthew on the work that he's done on this, because we are very much all very opinionated on what's happening in our own divisions, and for him to be able to herd us like cats into one room and to get a very fair playing field is well done.
He wasn't able to herd Robina into the conversation. Right, Councillor Hamill.
Mr Chair, I just wanted to make the one point why there'd been a lot of discussion and focus on some of the bigger amounts of funding. I think one of the really important points that Matt made, which is the reason why I'm prepared to back this, is that we know our discretionary grants funding is one of our most sought after funding rounds, and they're not big dollar amounts. They're the ones where $1,500, $3,000, maybe $4,000 to a really small targeted project is something that can make a really big difference in our local community or to a local group. So I'm really supportive of this because it opens up an opportunity to have more funding rounds for those small targeted amounts to allow our groups who are doing some really important work in the community to continue on with that. So happy to support the item.
Noting that it doesn't open up any more discretionary funding because we're capped by the Local Government Act. So, Matt, I think you've done a good job. I enjoyed watching the conversation 3 times. I'll just note that, importantly, you've confirmed that Watergum in particular will be able to gain some additional funding through some tweaks. And I'm still interested in having a conversation between now and council as to the timing of some of the funding, because I think that we do need to be mindful of the run into the local government election. So, councillors, with that, all in favour? Against? I reckon Councillor Pauline Young was the seconder. And now if we could get Councillor Peter Young, thanks, Courtney. And so we'll go back to 7.1. So we're at 7.1, moved Councillor Hamill, seconded Councillor Darren Taylor. Are we going to vote on that? All in favour? Carried. Well done. 7.2, the approval of significant contracting plan. Councillor Taylor and Councillor Hamill reverse their roles. Councillor Taylor, are you happy with the recommendation?
Yes, I am, Chair. Obviously, the staff review we're doing at the moment is really important for the city and ensure we get efficiency, and part of that is obviously reviewing the accommodation and this review is actually looking at improvements for our bundle facilities. So hopefully we can provide better outcomes for our staff.
Right, thank you. Councillors, all in favour? Carried. Well done. So I reckon we're almost there. So Councillor Peter Young, did you have any thoughts in regards to a general business item? Did you have any thoughts in regards to a general business item?
Yes, Chairman.
And we might need Jackie. We would ask for the Chief Revenue Officer, but she's not here. It's actually in regards to a question in regards to water rates.
So, Chairman, I don't have a motion, but
Yep.
you know I've provided you the information in related to this. Some background is that people who have rural properties have been given a bill by council for connection to water which they don't want and have never wanted it, even though the water's been there for 20 years and they've been there 20 years. And so people in rural areas are receiving bills. It's consistent with council's policy, but it just seems like a real aggravation, particularly at this time where we have to be mindful of cost impacts on ratepayers. And it seems to be an unnecessary charge, and I would be seeking that we review that, imposing those charges.
So I think Kathy Baker was here and she had left. So Jackie, the city traditionally goes through and looks at the proximity of properties that are currently not billed for water or sewer to existing sewer and water lines. And every now and then they do a sweep to see what they can find. And it was probably 5 or 6 years ago from memory that they did it, and they picked up some properties that were problematic, and we ended up removing them. So I think Councillor Young has had that happen to him, where a property that was, did it change hands 7 years ago? Yeah, so anyway, the current owner is not actually connected to water. The water is nearby the property, but we're billing them. So it's it is a policy question, but I think that we could potentially do better as to the notification to councillors in the first instance of any intent by the administration to start charging for the first time. And the example that we had previously in 2016 or whenever it was an attempt to just capture as many properties as possible, and some of them physically couldn't be connected because of the size of the mains. So I don't know whether or not you want to take it just as something. Councillor Young has raised a CR and got a policy answer back, but I think that we might need to look at it better. So you're happy just to take it on notice? Peter, are you happy with that, or do you want us to try to put together a general business item?
I'm seeing Jackie this afternoon, so I'll take it further with her then, if that's all right with you, CEO. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chairman.
Right.
Yeah, these people are on rural properties. The water mains is hundreds of metres for their home. They've been there 20 years. They don't want it, and all of a sudden they get a bill.
So it's the service charge effectively, but in order to connect, they're going to have to spend $60,000 or $70,000 to actually connect to avoid the $200 a quarter service charge. Sorry? Rightio, councillors, it's 11:07. Does anybody have any good general business items? We thank you for your attendance and your spirited bidding.
Thanks, Chairman.